It's the 1950s. Israel is a new nation, but it's hit some economic troubles, and the government has instituted a rationing regime. One of the main foods that has been limited under this regime is rice. And rice is a staple in the diets of many of the immigrants who just arrived in the new nation. David Ben-Gurion, Israel's prime minister at the time, was like, "I need an affordable rice substitute that the Israeli people can eat." He called up Eugene Proper, founder of Osem Food Company, with this request. The Osem Food Company came up with this wheat-based substitute for rice. Basically, they made these toasted, dried, tiny pasta things that were shaped like long-grain rice. They named them pititim, which means little crumbles in Hebrew. But most people just called them Ben-Gurion's rice, after the guy who commissioned them. Even though the rations were soon lifted, this little tiny pititim, it was ingrained in Israeli culture. It was easy to make, it could go with anything, and people came to love it. Thus, Osem kept making more, and they made more shapes. They made rings, they made stars, they even made a little tiny sphere. Let me tell you the story of how those pititim made it to the United States. Let's travel back in time to 1993. Israeli chef Mika Sharon is working at the Tribeca Grill in New York City, and one night she invites her boss over for dinner. Don comes over to Mika's apartment for dinner, and as they're sitting around the table, Mika serves something to her daughter. And Don looks at it and is like, "What is that? What are you serving her? Why can't I have any of that?" And Mika's like, "There are these little tiny spheres called pititim. We ate them in Israel growing up." And Don, an always curious chef, looks at them, takes a little bite, and says, "Those are some good grains right there." A few days later, a new dish appeared on the Tribeca Grill menu. It was sea bass over a plate of pititim in saffron broth. But on the menu, Don didn't call them pititim. He renamed them. He called them Israeli couscous. Okay. Very endearing story about how the Israeli couscous name came about. Chef, daughter, cute family dinner, etc. But there is this whole other narrative that Osem was just trying to figure out a new way to market their food abroad and decided it looked like North African couscous, and then the international market would be more receptive to that name than to pititim. But no matter what, by the turn of the 21st century, when I was growing up, Israeli couscous was all across America, and major celebrity chefs like Charlie Trotter and Martha Stewart were using it in recipes and publishing those in cookbooks and serving them at restaurants. This little tiny wheat-based substitute for rice had in the US been elevated to the finest levels of fine dining, which is quite a different path from where it was in Israel. One food, two different perceptions. In Israel, quotidian. In America, elegant. Why the change? Perhaps the celebrity endorsements played in. I'd argue the name had a lot to do with it. Saying the word couscous? Pretty fun.